my panel now. Congressman Rogers, you severed ties with the Trump administration just today officially. Statement was very amicable. Why did you leave the team?
I think they were going in a different direction. So all of the work on the transition has already happened. All of the national security portfolio, all the position papers, both the short pagers and the wider position papers were done. They're getting ready to do what's called landing teams. All of those people had been vetted. I understand there's been some changes on some of those teams, but those are the people that are getting ready to go in. So I think it's a natural course. Vice President Pence is going to come in and kind of head up the transition from here till completion day. And I think this is just kind of the natural occurrence of a campaign. Is there a little confusion in New York right yet? I think there is, but I think this is growing pains. And once they integrate people who have been doing it with people in New York, I think you'll see a smoother transition.
Do you have any concerns that the Trump national security team will not get the most qualified people for the most important senior posts?
You know, I've seen the list. I'd be a little bit skeptical of the name game that happens here. We've seen people who were never on the list throw their name to the press to say, I think I'm on the list. We've seen people who have always been on the list. I've not seen their name in the press at all. So I'm always a little skeptical of the name game that I see here. I think that when the names that I saw in my portfolios that were sent up to New York are very qualified people. I think America would be comforted that they could serve in the capacities of which they were recommended for. And by the way, this notion that there's no one interested, thousands and thousands and thousands of really good people were interested a little bit before the election and a lot after the election, surprisingly.
It happens in Washington, other places. Jennifer Jacobs, you've been reporting on the transition. You have some new reporting. What are you learning?
Well, I think Congressman Rogers is being polite. There's probably more power struggle happening than people realize. I think anyone who's loyal to Chris Christie is probably going to have trouble getting any sort of a cabinet post. And I know that some within Trump's inner circle did think that Mike Rogers was someone who was an ally of Chris Christie. He was of course, tapped by Christie before the election to oversee national security for the transition. I think that Rudy Giuliani or Jeff Sessions could pretty much have the pick of any post they would like. I know that Rudy Giuliani has his heart set on Secretary of State. It sounds like Sessions is interested in defense, so those are the two we would think that they would be leaning towards, but we also hear that there are other finalists for Secretary of State still, including John Bolton is still in the mix, as well as Richard Armitage and Henry Paulson.
Very similar to our reporting, both on the infighting, but also on many of those senior positions. Matt Visor, of course, one of the most signature positions of the campaign, Donald Trump, was drain the swamp, and that's still a phrase we hear since the election. But many of the names that are coming up for these senior positions are not exactly outsiders or newcomers. Is that likely to quickly disappoint some of his supporters?
Potentially. And I mean, you look at the lobbying activity going on right now, too. I mean, the swamp is being filled, in Washington in many ways. And I think that people may be disappointed, but you look at Trump and how he's made his past decisions, and none of this should be that much of a surprise. The way he ran his campaign was often a campaign in turmoil. With different people, lots of infighting, people being shoved out, coming back in. And I think that it shouldn't be a surprise now the way that this transition is being run. But I do think that some of the names, you look at his vice presidential pick, going with Mike Pence, a very traditional type of politician, not somebody out of the box. So I think the names that Trump is looking at now for some of the key positions are people that you would expect in those kind of positions.
I wonder if just the setup of the leadership sets up for bigger divisions going forward. When you have you have a Priebus in there as the chief of staff, then you have this somewhat unusual senior advisor position, Steve Bannon, certainly very strong personality coming from a different camp, and then you have Jared Kushner, the son-in-law. Does that concern you, Jennifer Jacobs, that they could bring it all together and actually run the government?
Well, I do know that they got along during the campaign. The Priebus camp and the Bannon camps really, truly respected each other and got along surprisingly well. I think it's more about a power struggle. No one expected Donald Trump to win, not even Mr. Trump. And so as this has become a reality, and it's only been a week, the power struggles have really become strong.
4 years minus 1 week. Jennifer Jacobs, Matt Visor, Congressman Rogers, thanks very much.